Good morning, friends. I am doing one of my own pieces today, which I don't get to do that often. And it's a small piece. I plan to paint rather simply. So I'm going to do it in real time. Hopefully it won't get too boring for you all. My husband took our almost 6-year-old with him to the gym. So I'm going to try to get done with this before they get back, because I don't know how many of you out there have 6-year-olds or have had 6-year-olds, but mine never stops talking. He is an amazing, marvelous, brilliant little ball of energy. And that is wonderful, except if I'm making a video. So we'll see if I get this done. I have been working on getting a new computer so I can use some video editing software, because I have a video to put together of painting a pet portrait of this beautiful cat I painted for someone. And the computer I had just basically all but died. It took it 10 minutes to open Gmail, so there was no way video editing was going to happen on that one. So I have a new one. Now I just have to get it started and get all the programs on it that I need and everything. And who has time for that? I don't. I'd rather be painting. So those of you who know me know I mostly do watercolor, and often I like to do what I'm doing here, which is I drew the image in with ink, and then I'm going in and painting it, and that gives that really fun illustrative effect. One thing I love about this technique is that I get the fine detail, which I love. I grew up with pencil drawing, and I love detail. So I can get that with my ink pens. And then when it comes to painting, I can just have a lot of fun. So I'm gonna go in with a initial wash. You saw me just get the paper wet, which allows me to start painting and create like a really soft glow. And I actually love starting my images out with this beautiful soft golden glow behind everything else I'm gonna do. It actually looks really good behind green. And I'm gonna do some green grass here, so we'll put quite a bit of it on here. And then I'll go over with green. I'll hope that this dries fast enough that I can go in and do detail. The problem with wet on wet, if you're an impatient artist like I am, is that you do have to wait for the paper to dry before you paint anything that has any hard edges, or you'll be in trouble. So I actually think I'm gonna turn on my ceiling fan. Don't need that light. Just turn on my ceiling fan and turn it up. And that should help us dry. I've got my windows open this morning. You can probably hear the birds. Hear a little airplane right now. It's just a perfect morning. The last few days I've been working on some pencil drawings for some black and white interior spot illustrations for a book that one of my clients is publishing. And what was lovely about that is I got to sit outside. I know some people who do watercolor do paint outside, but I find that too challenging. I need a flat surface. And usually when I'm outside with a flat surface, things fall on it. And if you have a wet then it gets wet. So I do all my watercolor painting indoors, usually on the floor. Sometimes I'll go down, I'm in my studio right now. Sometimes I'll go downstairs and use our big dining room table or use our coffee table and turn on some TV show. But usually I'm up here in my studio on the floor. When my husband helped put in the cabinetry and everything for my studio, he's like, "You want a table?" And I was like, "No, I don't. I love sitting on the floor." And that leaves that my studio is in a very tiny room in our house, so that leaves me with plenty of space, and when I'm done with a piece I can pick up everything and have a big open space in the middle of my room. So I'm just creating some cloud effects. Over here you see the really gradient wash when I smoothly put on this blue on top of the wet paper. Over here is what happens when you kind of dab it on, and then you saw me dabbing some of it off with a paper towel. And that gives you kind of like the effect of clouds. So I think my background's really good right now. So this piece I'm really, really excited about, actually, because I'm doing something new with it. You can see that it's a picture of a mom and a baby, and the mom is handing the baby a flag, but since I haven't painted it yet, you can't really tell what this flag is. I'll give you a hint. It's not the flag of any nation. So I'm going to go back in here with some green. Now, often with something like this, I kind of decide as I go what color I want the grass to be, because there's so much difference in the mood between like a yellowish grass and a bright green or a cool green. My book that was published by Henderson Publishing had a lot of pictures of a little baby out in the grass as the sun was setting, and I used a lot of cool greens and even purples and blues in that. But this little one, we're just doing a beautiful sunny summery day. So I'm coming with a little bit of my bright green, but I think mostly stick to my green that I've mixed with my yellows and my umber. Yeah, I like that. I like that little bit of definition along the edges there. A nice atmospheric effect. I think I need to pull the green down a little bit. I'm running low on some of my colors. I just finished a book illustration job, and I use a lot of yellow in it because it was for the Enneagram for Children series, and there are specific colors that actually coordinate with each personality type in the Enneagram. And this was number 2, the helper, and the color is gold. So I use a lot of my really deep yellow I have here, and a lot of my burnt umber. I think I'm saying that right. I always get burnt sienna and burnt umber names mixed up, but I think I'm saying the right one. So I am almost out of these. I need to refill them. I have more in the tube, but usually when I sit down to paint, I'm ready to just paint. I don't want to put down wet paint and let it dry before I can paint, and I'm also too impatient, too busy once I'm done painting to do it when I'm done. So I'll get around to it one of these days. It's kind of like setting up my computer. It's time for that. There are things to paint and create. All right, I am liking this. This is looking very much like a beautiful sunny yard. Got a mixture of maybe some clover and some grass and some creeping Charlie in here. Just a soft, pretty area. I do have it creeping up a little bit more than I wanted. I'm gonna find a different brush. When I'm lifting off color, I like to use brushes that are a little stiffer because they just do the job better. So this is my very favorite brush of all. This 1/2 inch square. This is what I do most of my washes with. If I'm doing a large painting, I'll use this bigger brush. This one's really nice, but for these little ones, this guy is perfect. So we're not even bringing out the big guns today. All right, now you can see here over here where this area was wetter, and it's kind of drawing with a bit of an edge. I'm not sure I like that. So I'm actually gonna clean this brush out really well and try to smooth that a little bit. Sometimes it's not worth it to go back in once things start drying because you just keep on creating new edges and it never ends. So sometimes you just say, you know what, that's just what the paint did. But I'm gonna try to smooth that out just a little bit. We'll see what happens. All right, so if I go in here, try to pick up some of this. It's coming up really well, but I'm probably gonna have to do this a couple times because it's still very wet down here. And I hadn't intended for the grass to come back this far. You can see where my pin marks are right here, but I kind of like it. I kind of like how that edge looks, so I think I'll leave that. I think I'll just lift it off of the foreground objects here. I had fun drawing this baby because I just wanted him to be just a tiny bit roly-poly. And I haven't decided yet what color his hair is going to be. Obviously he won't have much because he's just a little guy. But I'm not sure yet. What I initially really wanted to do was make a couple different variations of this with babies and mamas of different ethnicities. But I decided to just stick with this one because I don't have time. And it kind of seemed like overkill. But that leaves me with the choice of having to decide for just one baby. So, sorry for all that background noise. There is, I think, a garbage truck outside. Oh, there, he quieted down a little. So soaking up some of this damp with a little piece of paper towel usually helps when you're lifting off paint and you already have a pretty damp surface. So we'll go back into that in just a minute and see if it stayed where I wanted it to, but I'm gonna do this over here before it gets too dry. I mainly do watercolor painting. I've done a little bit of acrylic when I've painted like a wooden sign, or I did this really cool project a few years ago where I painted a rocking chair. That was really fun. And of course can't do watercolor with that, but when it comes to paper, it's always watercolor. I don't like working with anything else. But if you work with watercolor, you know that it's always a dance. It's always a dance between colors and not being too wet and not being dry, and just different thicknesses of paper and the amount of water you put on and whether there's air movement where you're painting all affect the dry time. So it's kind of guesswork, and honestly I think that's part of what I love about it. I love concepts that don't have hard edges. Concepts that have a deep, solid core, but no specific edges. And I feel like painting with watercolors especially is one of those. There are principles and things that are beautiful and work really well that you can go to again and again. So that solid core. But then everything else just flows. And you have to interact with your paper and with your colors and your brushes. And I feel like I'm co-creating. Like, I'm not the only one who's part of this process. The paints and the media I'm using are also part of it, and they contribute their own ideas. And then sometimes I'm like, that is not what I intended, but I like it better. And I love that. I'm gonna shut my window real quick because whoever's out there is just, I think, gonna stay for a while. So we'll shut out that annoying noise a little bit. Get in here and hopefully be dry enough to start to add some of my detail. So this water is pretty murky. I'm gonna put it back a little bit and use it just to clean my brushes. Pull forward this. I always use 2 cups of water because if your water gets too murky, you're gonna have color pollution when you're trying to use a new color. So I'm gonna go in here with a red now. So I should probably test and see if this is dry, but I'm gonna do like I usually do and just start painting and say whoops if it starts to bleed. But I mean, obviously this is not completely dry yet, but I think this little area might be dry enough to take another color and not bleed. Look at that. It is. I guessed right. I love guessing and just going with my gut. That's another thing I love about being an artist is you don't have to have an exact formula. Just go with your gut and guess and see where it leads you. Obviously, there are some things in life where you need an exact formula. And I am grateful for the people that are gifted in that. So if you are one of those people, thank you. And if you're listening to me talking about just guessing and going with your gut and that gives you anxiety, that's just fine. We don't want everyone in the world to feel at home with that because we need some exact things in our world. And we need some things that are fluid. I'm going to use a little bit of a brighter red here. My favorite red, actually, is this one right here. It's kind of an orange red. I just love how it pops. And I use it for all my skin tones. Even darker skin tones. Because our blood is red. Our skin all has a red underlay. And I love that. All right, I often when I paint this flag, I just go one after the other sequentially, and then my colors all bleed, and then I have to fix them. So I'm going to try something different this time by starting at the other end, and hopefully I counted out the colors correctly with my stripes. I think I did. So that, I am not very familiar with working with purple yet, and it seems to be a pretty picky color. If you get it too light, it looks gray. If you get it too dark, it looks black. And I've really been trying to expand that. One thing I do often is I'll mix some of this color, which is called red. It's a shade of red on the name of the tube, but I think of it as pink. Sometimes I'll mix that with my purples, and that creates a really lovely, almost fuchsia color, and that can really help it not look too dark. So I'm leaving some of the really dark on the edges where I want it to look a little shadowed. And sometimes, for some reason, if I go in with blue on top of my purples, which you wouldn't think you'd need to if your purple's too dark to add blue, but sometimes that really makes it pop too. But I think what I'm gonna do now actually is just lift off a little bit of that. See how that goes. Oh yeah, there we go. See, that's much more recognizable now as purple. So now that I've got two of the colors down, you can probably guess what this flag is. Because this is the month of June. And many of you probably already know that June is Pride Month. And that has become very important to me over the last few years, because I have met and become close with some of the most beautiful people and heard some of the difficulties they've had not being accepted for who they are. And after having my son, my heart just broke for anyone who feels like who they are is not acceptable. That should never happen. So I have been an ally for a while now, personally. But I just realized in May that I could come out officially as an ally for my business. It's my business. I get to say what it is. And Butterfly Bakery, an incredible bakery here in Lincoln, actually was the one that presented the idea to me inadvertently, just by being themselves. They are an out business, and the concept had not occurred to me before that was a thing you could do. And now that I know, it seemed like such a great choice for my business to come out as an ally. You know, chances are, if my son is not in the community, that he'll have friends that are. And my husband's a high school teacher, and he's had many students who are in the community. And those kids need to know that there are all sorts of professional people in our city that support them. So see, I'm going back and forth still with my colors. It seems to be working so well so far. I haven't had any bleeds yet. I'm not going to count our chickens before they're hatched. But so far so good. I'm also trying not to get my brush too wet because I am rushing this a bit just to get it done. My video is already kind of long, so if you've decided it's too much, I don't blame you. Alright, so we're going to go back to yellow now. And I'm going to get my paler yellow because I want it to be distinguished from the orange. So this is the yellow I usually use, and it just reminds me of sunshine and honey and bees and flowers. But this is more of a pure yellow. So we're going to go in with that. I will use this yellow too if I'm painting the sun. Often I'll use this paler yellow. Push a little bit more dye in there. You know what? I'm going to give it a minute before I put in the green stripe, because I'm nervous about joining those two while everything's wet. So next I'm going to go in and grab a slightly larger brush and make some skin tone. So I start with this one. The darker color you always need less of. And my palette's pretty dirty because usually when I mix up a color, I want more of it, and I just leave it on here. Occasionally I'll wipe a section clean and start over, but all right, so we've got a little bit of that. And then I just add a little bit of this again, just such a great multi-purpose color. We'll mix that in. See where we're going with that. And then all we need to do with this is get it very diluted. I'm gonna start on Mama's skin first because the baby's gonna be paler. So I wanna know exactly what I'm working with before I do baby. And actually, I don't think I have enough red in there. Got too much brown. For exactly the kind I'm wanting. There we go. Look at that. That works so well. When I first started painting skin, I veered a little too far towards the brown or the tan tones because that's in my brain I was like, skin is tan. And it was only through experience that I learned, no, our skin is red. And then if you're white, see-through. So technically what's under our skin is red, and then our skin is see-through. So the red tones are what come out, especially in shadows. I used to think shadows were gray or black until I started seeing them with an artist's eye and realizing they're not. Shadows are always colored unless it's very dark and there's no light reflected. That's the only time you'll actually have a black shadow. So oftentimes with watercolor, it's sufficient just to put black or gray over your colors, since watercolors are a little bit transparent, and then you get the right amount of color showing through. But often the best choice is just to start out with color. And one thing I've been experimenting with lately is purple shadows, which are just beautiful. Might do some here, I don't know. I usually wait till the very end to do my shadows for a couple reasons. One is it just seems like the last touch, but one of them is that with watercolor you want to paint from lighter to darker areas. You want to preserve your lighter areas. And with this painting, which I'm doing pretty simply, I'm not going to do a ton of shading. So I'll probably just drop in a few shadows right at the end. I think I want to blend that a little more, but we'll put in some more color first. It's amazing what shadows can do to an image. It makes something look like a children's coloring page into a work of art. Not that children's coloring pages are not works of art. I love the art that children do. So we're just going to blend these things a little bit. Often when you're blending, you have to get the whole area wet or you're going to have weird little edges like we got over here. But I think that is pretty good for my mama. Put some more shadows on her face. All right, now we're gonna go in with this baby. And And I think that same color is probably perfect for baby. So I'm gonna paint his whole head because his hair is just gonna be fuzz that we'll just put on top. And we want that paint to show through because he's a baby. I was holding a baby last night who was 7 months old. And just noticing how his hair, like, he had a head of hair, but you could see his scalp through all of it because he's still pretty little. So I'm thinking about that right now as I'm painting this. So this I plan to offer as a print when I'm done, when this is fully dried. I'll scan it and create a digital image, and then I will print it so I can offer it for a really affordable price. And so if you want to do something for Pride Month, I'm gonna have these prints for sale, and the original two probably. Sometimes I don't decide if I want to keep an original or sell it until after I'm done, but there's only so many originals that I have room for sitting around and not being enjoyed by anyone. Anyway, 10% of my proceeds from this print during the month of June will go to Out in Nebraska. So yeah, if you're thinking about what you can do to support our neighbors and our friends and our family members, here is an option. So Out in Nebraska works within the state of Nebraska, obviously, to pay attention to legislation that's going to affect the LGBTQ community, and they notify their followers, so you can notify your politicians, express your opinion. And they also work to create just a safe and caring space for people to feel at home. I believe they have a business listing of allied businesses. So I'm going to have to contact them and say, hey, put me on the list. I do a lot of commissions and a lot of portraits, and if you are part of the LGBTQ community, if you want a portrait of you and your partner, or something with pride colors or something like that, let me know. Be happy to serve you. I was working on a little more shading. My grass right here is still damp, but as I'm placing my hand on different parts of the image, I'm starting to feel that it's mostly getting dry enough, so that's good. I should be able to finish my painting. And honestly, don't have a ton more to do. So usually when I create a piece of art, I have a mental image, but the details are not completely worked out. I'm gonna add some, for my simple images, I always do a rosy cheek. It's not completely realistic to life, so my more realistic portraits, obviously I follow the actual skin tone of the person I'm doing the portrait of. But for these little happy ones, I feel like it just adds that extra bit of life and joy and whimsy. Whimsy's one of my favorite words. So anyway, as I was saying, I interrupted myself. I'm not sure what color her dress should be. Not green, because we've got green here. Not blue, because we've got blue going on. I don't think yellow, because that's going to blend too much. Maybe purple. I'm thinking purple. I'm thinking a nice fuchsia shade would be really good. I'm gonna do her hair real quick though. I'm thinking a light brown hair. So first I'll just go in with a wash. Get the whole thing. I want it to be darker than this, but we'll cover it first. Oh, that was a little too much. Sometimes I can lift stuff if I just put it down just with my finger, but that one wasn't coming up. There, that looks good. Even blending some of this, fading it into the background can make it look like her hair's blowing in the wind and you can see the sky between the strands. All right, so now I'm gonna make sure my brush isn't too wet and go in with this darker, this is just like a rich mahogany brown. And do some of this here. Get this back here. Get a little bit more of the pigment. And just fade that in and you can see that there's thickness back there that's creating a shadow. I'm gonna fade this in a little bit. I want to leave some highlights to make it look like the light is reflecting off of her hair. You know, I usually determine while I'm doing a painting also where the light source is. And I haven't really,